It's June 9th, 2020, and this is Sketchworks NewsBrake. The news stops here. I'm Brian Troxel, and I am relieved that we have finally reached the silly phase of the coronavirus pandemic. Protests continued this week around the country and around the world. By and large, the protests have been peaceful, with genuine displays of compassion and solidarity between protesters and police. In Washington, D.C., peaceful protests were disrupted by the National Guard so that President Trump could walk from the White House to St. John's Episcopal Church and hold up a Bible. It was a move that even left God confused. The ongoing protests have brought to light the need for accountability among our public servants. Here with a special report, plagiarized almost entirely from yesterday's New York Times briefing, is NewsBrake correspondent and journalism school dropout, Allie O'Neill.
Last Thursday, Buffalo, New York police shoved a 75-year-old protester to the ground, leaving him lying there bleeding out of his ear. Meanwhile, the police report said that the man took a little tumble and was injured when he tripped and fell. In Philadelphia last week, the police said that a man had pushed an officer off of his bike. A video instead showed an officer striking the man with a baton. And of course, in Minneapolis, the original police account of George Floyd's death initially left out the most important details, like the knee pressed onto his neck for nearly 9 minutes. All of these lies from the police are getting really out of hand. If there were no footage from bystanders, then the truth may never be revealed. This is why it is imperative that we, as law-abiding American citizens, must put the phones down and stop recording our public servants screwing up so badly. If we don't record the truth, they can't be called liars. I saw a video from The Onion this past week about one cop's struggle of living in the fear that he could be filmed beating citizens at any moment. We need to have a heart and care more about our boys in blue. Also, that video was from like 2 years ago, and it showed up in my feed because clearly the algorithm has a dark sense of humor.
This just in, Sketchworks NewsBrake correspondent and failure of Ethics in Journalism 101, Allie O'Neill, has been fired from Sketchworks NewsBrake for gross negligence regarding the blatant plagiarism of her last report. We're all proud of you for completing your stint in rehab, Allie, but please, in the future, do better. Also included in yesterday's New York Times briefing was information on how to make a sorbet, because that's what America needs right now. Sorbet. Confederate monuments that stood for more than 100 years are starting to come down as part of the Black Lives Matter movement. In Virginia, protesters knocked down one such statue. Protesters in England did the same to a statue of a 17th century slave trader, except they tossed it into a river. Or, if you believe what the police are saying, the statue merely tripped and fell over. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi joined other members of Congress this week in kneeling and staying silent for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to honor George Floyd. Afterward, Pelosi needed help from an aide, cracked a joke about her high heels, and giggled.
It's better not to have on high heels.
A somber moment indeed. Pelosi explained what happened at a subsequent press conference.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
I kind of feel bad for her because I know what it's like to be so drunk that you can't stand up. Corporate brands are joining the Black Lives Matter movement in growing numbers. Sketchworks NewsBrake correspondent Tim Millard shows you why most corporations shouldn't even think of raging against the machine.
I never thought I would have to say this, but thank you, Kendall Jenner. Her canceled Super Bowl commercial proves two things. It takes more than Pepsi to solve racism, and corporate brands and social activism do not always mix. For example, Nextdoor posted this Black Lives Matter message on Twitter. Within 2 minutes, somebody probably used Nextdoor to report a black person came within 3 miles of their home. Here's what NBC posted on Twitter. This message comes from the same network that brings you Law & Order Special Victims Unit.
Right? Just a minute.
Please, I get it. Yes, I get it. That's enough. Get off.
Get off me.
That might explain why President Trump keeps tweeting about Law & Order. By the way, someone actually researched how many times the police violate someone's rights on Law & Order SVU. It is an average of once an episode, usually for excessive force. Then you have Ben and Jerry's. They are going beyond Black Lives Matter. They outright call for the dismantling of white supremacy, which will probably be followed by a brand new ice cream flavor called Fuck Off Neo-Nazis, Klansmen, and Other White Supremacists. It's not Pepsi, but it might just do the trick. For Sketchworks NewsBrake, I'm Tim Millard.
Thank you, Tim Millard, for another tasty report. That ice cream will go really well with my sorbet. On Sunday, the Minneapolis City Council pledged to dismantle the police department. It will be replaced by the Twin Cities Elementary School Safety Patrol. Not a lot of diversity in that picture. I still see problems ahead. The U.S. Space Force may have lost its first battle. Netflix is trademarking the Space Force name around the world as part of its comedy movie of the same name. Now, it wouldn't stop the U.S. Space Force, but it's not a good look when a branch of the U.S. military loses to an unarmed online video streaming service. Major League Baseball is proposing a comeback from the coronavirus. Current plans call for a shortened season, with players making around half of their regular salaries. But the games will still be just as boring as ever. The Devil's Backbone Brewing Company of Roseland, Virginia, is looking for a chief hiking officer. The job pays $20,000 for a person to spend 5 to 7 months hiking the Appalachian Trail. Oh, and hosting beer parties all along the way. Applicants must be 21 or over and promise not to sue when they get drunk and fall off a cliff to their death. And while it's not a requirement, it helps to have facial hair like Tim Millard. Get ready, Southeast. Louisiana has already experienced several inches of rain since Sunday's landfall of Tropical Storm Crisco. There's a storm a-coming. A Florida woman's early morning wake-up turned out to be 2 alligators fighting each other.
Joe, they're fighting. They're fighting. They're fighting. He just, oh my God, they're fighting outside the door.
She was very surprised because usually at that time, the people fighting outside her front door are meth heads. Modern science has figured out how tiny tadpole-like creatures protect themselves from predators. They build so-called snot homes that keep predators out but allow food to come in. HGTV is already working on a new season of Snot House Hunters. It took a decade, but someone finally found buried treasure hidden somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. A millionaire hid a small treasure chest and left clues in a poem. He won't say who found the treasure, but Sketchworks has learned the treasure was found by a small group of children from Oregon who plan to use the treasure to save their families' homes from foreclosure. In international relations news, Natalie Kauter and Adrian Pohlmann, a married couple who work for the German Foreign Ministry, have both been appointed ambassadors to Slovenia. Of course, we all know Natalie's the one who will make the decisions, while Adrian just nods and says, "Yeah, dear, anything you say, dear." And even if having the two as ambassador doesn't work out, what's going to happen? It's Slovenia. I'm not married. An Amazon worker in Wales lost her engagement ring while at work, but it turns out she doesn't like the guy, so if you find a ring in your Amazon package, go ahead and keep it. An 1888 letter written by painters Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin, detailing their visits to French brothels, ooh, I'm interested now, is estimated to sell at a Paris auction for as much as $250,000. Whereas a note scribbled by Pablo Picasso complaining about poor service he received at a Burger King will probably go for about $50 or so. It was revealed Britain's Prince William has been anonymously volunteering at a helpline during the coronavirus lockdown. William tried to keep his work for the crisis call center a secret, but callers became suspicious when they received advice like, eat some caviar, go horseback riding, helicopter to your grandma's Scottish castle for a long weekend. And that's all for Sketchworks NewsBrake. We'll be back next week, and we hope you are too. I'm Brian Troxell. Say hi to your grandma's Scottish castle for me. I hear it's really nice.
Also, that video was from like 2 years ago, and it showed up in my feed because clearly the algorithm has a dark sense of humor. I got that one from the comments on the YouTube. I should have studied in college.